This is Anita Wingley for Faith is Strong Today, and we want to start off this week's video with a content warning. This story deals with death and abuse and may be disturbing for some viewers. If these topics are triggering for you, please be advised that this video may not be for you. We've also provided some resources for victims of residential schools and for learning about reconciliation at the end of this video and in the video description. Last week, the remains of 250 Indigenous children were discovered at Canada's largest residential school, and it's prompted nationwide outrage and calls for further searches of unmarked graves. A survey conducted with ground-penetrating radar found the graves of children, some as young as 3 years old, at Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia. The residential school was run by the Catholic Church from 1890 to 1969, and at its peak in the 1950s, more than 500 students were enrolled there. Residential schools were a part of the Canadian government's policy of forced assimilation, a practice that traumatized generations of Indigenous children who were forced to abandon their native languages, learn English or French, and convert to Christianity. More than 150,000 First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children were placed in residential schools from the 1870s to 1996. Many of the children at these schools were physically, sexually, or psychologically abused in a system that's now described as cultural genocide. Residential schools are not a footnote in Canadian history, because the last residential school closed only in 1996, which means that many people who attended residential schools are still alive, or their parents attended, and they're still dealing with the trauma of the events.
You can't be in the downtown east side without noticing the really stark racialization of Indigenous poverty and homelessness and addiction. And so much of that is the impacts of generations of colonialism, including the residential school.
Experts say that this will not be the last time that discoveries of this kind are made at residential schools. But the scale of this discovery, 215 graves, is causing a moment of reckoning. There are scenes from across Canada of prayer flags, children's shoes at memorials, and people wearing orange in solidarity. Canadian politicians are being urged to seize this moment as an opportunity to search for the children's remains at other former schools. Christian churches were essential in the founding and operation of these schools. The Roman Catholic Church was responsible for running up to 70% of the schools, and the United, Anglican, and Presbyterian operated the remainder. In the years since, the Roman Catholic Church is the only one who hasn't issued a formal apology for its involvement in residential schools. But these events are bringing that to the forefront.
This is technically a genocidal event that's happened for a few hundred years in Canada, and the Pope has to acknowledge that.
In response to this news, churches and denominations across the nation have been issuing statements expressing their sorrow for the lives lost. This discovery has also garnered a global response, prompting statements from Human Rights Watch and the United Nations. But that's not enough. One of the best things our society can do right now is to listen, as the First Nations people grieve and speak up. Reconciliation is going to require accountability, time, and dialogue, and every one of us has a role to play. In the description, we've linked to some resources to help you learn about this issue and take appropriate action. Support is also available. The Indian Residential School's crisis line is available 24 hours a day for anyone experiencing pain or distress as a result of his or her residential school experience at 1-866-925-4419. And for more conversations on news and current events, stay tuned to Faith Strong Today.